Lovely. So first up today, we have Mark Songhurst and Danny Cooper from the Leeds Teaching Hospitals NHS Trust. The Trust is one of the Department of Health and Social Care's 6 Scan for Safety programme demonstrator sites, and Mark and Danny will be providing a Trust perspective on GS1 standards. Over to you.
I think Mark's on mute.
Sorry, good morning, everyone. I'm having slight computer difficulties this morning. I'm not certain whether it's the operator or the computer or possibly both. So good morning, my name's Mark. I'm the Scan for Safety project manager here at Leeds Teaching Hospitals and also the programme lead in the organisation.
Morning, everyone. My name's Danny Cooper and I'm the project assistant in Scan for Safety.
Excellent. So this morning we want to talk you through how Scan for Safety looks at Leeds Teaching Hospitals and how it interacts with GS1 standards and how that allows us to improve patient care.
So just a brief overview of LTHT. We're one of the largest trusts in the country and account for roughly 1% of the Department of Health's budget. And due to changing our focus from cost improvements to waste reduction, we're now one of the most financially sustainable organisations. That's allowing us to reinvest in new equipment each year, and in 2018-2019 that was 66.2 million. We're currently building 2 new state-of-the-art hospitals with £600 million of government funding. And as you can see on the screen, there's plenty of other big numbers, over 18,000 staff, nearly 9,000 babies born. Yeah, next slide, please.
Okay, so to look at where we are now, we have a number of core enablers that we put into place. So from the National E-Procurement Strategy published by the Department of Health and Social Care, we built on the Global Standards 1 Peppol adoption programme, and we were a demonstrator site and selected as part of that. Our first task in that demonstrator phase was to put 3 enablers in place. These were global location numbers for place, global service relationship numbers for patients, and global trade item numbers for products. From those enablers, we were asked to do 3 things. Could we implement an effective inventory management solution? Could we initiate a fast and rapid product recall so that when we have recalls in the NHS, we can find those products quickly and efficiently? And can we implement Peppol standards and see some benefits? To be able to do that, we needed several things within the organisation. Our clinical and executive officer support, and we are lucky that we had the Deputy Chief Medical Officer as the Executive Officer for Scan for Safety. He has recently retired and has been replaced by the Medical Director for Unplanned Care and also the Director of Finance as our Executive Board member, both of whom we engage with regularly. We've spent time understanding the standards and how we can combine them to get benefits. And then we've made sure that we've got clinical buy-in. So our clinical colleagues know what we're doing and know what we're trying to do. And that allows us then to reach that golden part of having Scan for Safety at use within the organisation.
So here are the GS1 standards that we use in Leeds. We're able to track our patients using the GSRN. Track down to a location using the global location number, and be able to track all our products using the GTINs. And no matter where the patient arrives in the hospital, be that A&E, SAU, elective, or they've just been born, they'll all be issued a wristband with a GSRN. And in terms of deploying GLNs throughout the trust, we have our room and door plaques that are on the left and the bed plaques on the right. We've deployed over 24,000 plaques across the trust, with each room having a door and room plaque. And we're also able to use the GLN extensions to be able to scan down to bed space, diagnostic and treatment space.
So one of the challenges that we identified is that when manufacturers create their own catalogues, we had a problem in that quite often catalogue manufacturers' part numbers were the same. And this was fine whilst we were looking at the catalogue, but the moment we put this into deployment in the organisation, it did mean that people were quoting the wrong codes for the wrong items. We were getting deliveries in and going, this isn't what we expected, and having to send it back. And what we were able to do then is, as part of this, we adopted the use of GTINs across the organisation. So we didn't take any code, we don't apply our own code, we use the GTIN that suppliers and manufacturers use. So we are talking about the exact products. And I've fabricated some GTINs at the end, but as you can see, the GTINs are all different for each item. And that means that when we order something, we're sending you a very clean order out. That enables us to have inventory management at a local level. And we do this in several ways here at Leeds. We have everything from the high-flying RFID cabinets that we use the GTIN to assign to an RFID chip, and we can tell what is in the cabinet at any point, to a basic inventory whereby we use the barcodes you put on the products themselves, either with our inventory staff or by our clinical staff for purposes of issuing, so that we can scan very quickly an item in an operating theatre to count it as used and feed through to our systems so that it's reordered. Or also for our materials management team. And our materials management team are a forgotten workforce in this organisation. They provide all the products that are used on our wards and departments. That is 232 locations that have a member of staff that comes onto that area and stocks up all the products that they need. And again, that is barcode-driven data. With our inventory, we have gone paper-free. We do not have a paper order that is left in this organisation. And all our inventory starts with the clinician. The clinicians decide what products they would like available, and we create the computer catalogue. From the computer catalogue, we create the list to create the inventory, and we create the store location. And as you can see here, these are examples of our store locations. We would like to say that we have large, spacious rooms. The reality is that storage within healthcare settings is limited to the broom cupboard, and we end up maximising the tiny space that we have. Once it's in the inventory system, we put the stock levels into the computer. From the computer, our clinicians will pull the item from the shelf. They take it into the theatre, they use it with the patient, and then they scan to say that they've used it. This has actually decreased some of our wastage in the organisation because they can now have a range of products in the operating theatre but know the cost of them. They don't open them until the point that they are needed. This means that anything that's not used can go back on the shelf. Our inventory teams then reorder, and that is sometimes done by a manual push of an order if it's urgent, or by automatic reordering. That goes through the computers again, and the cycle continues. I am hoping for a slide change right about now. So if we look at the benefits of using Peppol and using this, first point of call as ever is our clinical teams placing the orders. They count the usage, the system says this is what we need. So whether it is top up and we tell the computer we need X amount, or whether it is the clinical team saying this is what we have used. The computer technology then spits out several pieces of information. One is we send the order through to the general ledger for accounting purposes. The second is that that ledger also then approves the order. They are pre-approved. So we don't have an order that is sat waiting for permission to go out. The stock levels in inventory management automatically transfer the order out as pre-approved. We send out an order that has the exact product location in. We have a global trade item number that we are sending out to you. We know exactly what we want, and it's from your catalogue. We have the exact quantity. So when we need a box of 10, we order 1 box of 10. We do not end up ordering 10 boxes of 10. That information comes through from our catalogue. We pull the matching price through from the catalogue and the price lists. We give you a ship to address. That also comes with a global location number that can be traced back to Location Manager from GS1. So if you want to look in Location Manager, you can look up the global location number, and it will tell you where that goods bay is with its full address and its opening hours and a contact telephone number for that goods bay. We have the exact organisation on there through GLN again, and we will send you out an order number. That comes to yourselves as manufacturers, where you can pick the correct goods, send them to the correct location with the correct quantities. We can receive these correct items. We can match automatically the order number and match the price, and then we can actually automate that payment. This means there are no holdups in the payment that is coming through to yourselves. The benefits of this catalogue management and inventory management is that we can see mass data. We can see which products are slow moving, and we can have discussions on wastage. We can see which products are moving quickly and whether we have enough of those on the shelf to cope with demand. This is actually a live snapshot of one of our dashboards, and it shows the product lines that we've actually assigned to a patient in the last 30 days. So we assigned in the period here 10,000 items to patients with a value of £811,000. Of those 10,000 items, 1,100 roughly were implantable items, and we can see the value. We can also see that actually that affected 613 patients. We can see the number of products that we have on the inventory management and the number of locations we hold. There is some skewed data in here. We have a GTIN coverage. We have 86% in our inventory management and 44% in our catalogue. That is not actually as bad as it sounds, because our catalogue does hold items that we would not expect a GTIN for. For example, electricity coming through. Most importantly, when we are recording the batch lot number and expiry date of the products you send, we can now see this electronically. And this shows us the number of expired products on our shelves, the number of products expiring in the next 30 days and their value, and so on up to 90 days, or the rest of our storage and value. It enables us to manage that inventory, manage the resources for the taxpayer, and make sure we talk to our clinicians when we hit 60 days to say, we've got this product that's about to expire. Is there a patient on your list we can use it for? It also will help you that we can notify you when consignment items are coming due for changing out and being updated. So how does this look for the global position? What are we trying to actually do? This is a complex diagram. It starts with a patient requiring surgery. A clinician sees the patient and decides which implant they require, and they enter it into their appropriate clinical system. That also gets logged into the patient administration system. These feed into two systems. The inventory management system now has a live link to that patient administration system. This means we can track everything back to the patient. We have recently gone live with a new inventory management solution, and we have 100% recording against patients for every procedure. That is an amazing achievement that we are getting that level of compliance. We will also be shortly joining in the theatre scheduling system, and that will provide clinical details of the procedure and the planned date. And we're pulling in all the information you supply in your catalogues. That is the inventory system's role now within the operating theatres to take some of this data forward. We're hoping to get to a point where we can pick and pack, including sizes either side if required by the surgeon. Once the patient is admitted for surgery, all the items can be scanned to the patient and the inventory decreased for what has been used, and unused items can be returned to procurement to be put back on the shelves. If we have procurement putting things back on the shelves, they go in the right place at the right time. All this information can then be fed out, and we are working very currently on some links. So information will transfer out to the electronic health record, and that will be able to be seen by the GP and the patient. It means that for the first time, our patients will be able to see which implants are available, have been implanted into them. It will mean that they could have a discussion with their general practitioner about them, and we can gain better knowledge as an industry and as a hospital. It also means that if there is ever that product recall again, we hope to be able to give our patients the first line of defense, which is, I can check my medical records and see what I have implanted in me. Does this concern me? The financial information is transferred out to our general ledger and allows for accounting. We also send information to the hospital costing team so we can ensure that we reduce waste and we see clinical variation decrease. We're working on the links nationally for this data to go into the national implant registries automatically. That will save time and effort in the hospital. And then stock items, most importantly, can be automatically replenished. And the next time a clinician requires that product, we know it will be available on the shelf.
So here's an example of a typical journey a patient may take when in one of our hospitals. Patients often get lost en route or returning to wards, which results in staff having to spend time to locate them. That might be physically going to a ward or phoning round wards. And as you can see, it's quite a complex slide, a fancy slide. So on to the next one, Mark, please. So using the GLNs and the GSRNs, we're able to locate where a patient was at during their treatment. This has inevitably stopped the phone calls, and patients have said that they feel a bit safer as well. More importantly, we've also gained visibility of where the patient was in their theatre treatment, and if a relative was to ask where the patient was or how they were getting on, we'd have better information to go on to advise them. So this is live bed state, and this is basically a collaborative piece of work between Scan for Safety, digital informatics, clinical site managers, and emergency and specialty medicine. We've been able to create a live bed state for the trust that gives us visibility of bed occupancy across all our hospitals, allowing us to plan more efficiently. We're now looking at how we can make this into like an operational demand and occupancy dashboard. All this uses the GLN and GLN extensions as a source of data, and this massively increases patient care and efficiency, and also saves us a bit of money on the bed reporting side. So a couple of examples of Scan for Safety use cases being used in a clinical environment. So we've got blood tracking, which we're currently in the process of setting up the first sites to go onto Blood Track TX. This application uses Scan for Safety and upgrades to our existing systems, which should effectively eliminate wrong blood in tube events from occurring. And it also saves the patients from having two separate vena punctures for cross-matching, resulting in the trust being compliant with MHRA 2 sample rule. The system works off the patient's GSRN to produce a safety check for the nursing staff and acts as a completely safe second check-in system for the nurse. We've also got the intelligent blood fridges, which are basically vending machines for blood. These are located near the high usage wards and stop us from doing any just in case ordering, giving us an accurate inventory of blood that we need at the time, reducing any wastage. We've also got advanced therapies. So leads were tasked with designing a solution to track advanced therapy T cells that are taken from a patient and sent to a lab in Edinburgh to be genetically modified. This uses GLN data and provides a complete chain of custody, ensuring that patients get the correct treatment. And this is quite important because it's a very costly procedure. It's in the excess of about 250,000. So next slide. So this slide shows some of the benefits that Scan for Safety brings. So the image on the left shows £126,000 of out-of-date stock that was removed from a RFID cabinet, basically because no one was managing the cabinet. We're now able to manage our inventory and eliminate situations like this from happening. We've also seen a big increase in patient satisfaction due to staff being able to spend more time with the patient by the bedside, delivering a high level of patient care. So patient transfers, this is a clinical benefit we've gained here at Leeds. Instead of making a patient comfortable doing their observations, then going to do all the computer work in the background, we can do all this at the patient bedside using GS1 standards. We update all systems in a simple process to transfer the patient from one ward to another. The result of this is a precise live bed state down to bed level, a record of the patient's journey around the trust, which can be easily accessed on PPM Plus. And it saves us a lot of time as well. It saves roughly 10 minutes per transfer. And as you can imagine, we're a very big trust, and that's a lot of transfers per year. So currently we're at about 57% of transfers being carried out in this method, but hopefully in the coming months that'll be going up to about 90%. And we've got a short video to play as well, just to give you an example of what that looks like.
Member of the implementation team, and today I will be demonstrating the transfer functionality on PPM Plus mobile app. So the safest way to do this is by clicking on the patient search and scanning your patient's wristband. So that's what we're going to do. So you click into there, click on the QR code that would open up the camera, go to your patient and scan the wristband. This then brings you to the patient's page, and the functionality we're going to use is the update location, which is the icon on the top right-hand corner. So you would click into there. This would open up the camera. You would go to your patient's bed and scan the Scan for Safety barcode. At this point, you would recognize that that patient is not on your ward, and you would get a pop-up message to say, do you want to transfer the patient to this ward? You would click yes, and that would load up the patient transfer page. As you can see, all the information has already been filled in. So you've got your date and your timestamp, the ward that you're sending the patient to, and the bed as well. And the consultants and everyone is all correct. Once you're happy with all the data, you click on the transfer button, which is on the bottom right-hand corner. And this is when it will be speaking to Paz. And once it comes back to the patient's homepage, that means that that transfer has gone through successfully. It would update PAS and the electronic whiteboard. You would then go back to your homepage and sign out.
So that's just one example of how we're using GS1 standards within our hospital to make life better for our patients. And that's very direct. That happens at the bedside, releasing nursing time to care. It's done as part of warding the patient and really makes a difference to the way in which patients feel. Nurses are being taken out from behind a nursing station, removed from being at a computer at the end of the bed to being at the patient bedside. One of the other benefits we've gained is product recall, and here we have a worked example. We received a product recall for some implants at 10:15 in the morning from the MHRA. We then, by 10:28, had confirmed that we did have those products in the trust, but that they weren't going to be used in any of that day's surgery. By 11:42, we had confirmation to the medical director operations that the products had been removed from the clinical areas and that they were under the control of the appropriate inventory managers. That was 136 items that we removed from the organisation very quickly, very efficiently. And it is something that we can do time and time again. It means that we no longer require our clinical staff to be running around whilst trying to carry out surgical lists. We have a team of people that can do it. It also means in the same time, that if we had to do a patient recall, we didn't on this, but if there was a patient recall, electronically we could identify those patients, meaning that we are not searching through theatre books that have mass numbers of barcodes in. So I hope you've all found that useful to see how we are using the GS1 standards within our hospitals, and how the information you're providing as suppliers comes through to us and the benefits that it gives to our patients. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mark and Danny. That was a really insightful presentation. It's absolutely clear of the benefits that the Scan for Safety journey and GS1 standards have enabled across multiple departments at the Trust, and also you've made it clear the impact on the patient, and specifically that particular comment around making life better for your patients. It's absolutely crystal clear how you've done that, so thank you. I'm going to hand over to Chris. I think we've got a couple of minutes just to take maybe one or two questions.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. Really interesting presentation. Good to see that video and seeing GS1 standards in action. Just to let everybody know, we've got lots of questions coming in. It's not appropriate to answer all of them right now. Some of them will be leaving for the other sessions because they're more appropriate for the other sessions. But cracking on to the first question, it's specifically for Leeds. How reliable are the barcodes on products for scanning? Is there a way to manually input the code if it will not scan the barcode?
So they're fairly reliable. There are one or two that come through, and the choice of paper usually causes the ink to blur and we can't scan. If we can't scan the barcode, we can look the product up in the inventory system. And actually that's done off a multi-search function. So we don't have to just type in the barcode. We can actually search by what that clinician would know the product as. So we don't risk that error in transposition.
Thank you very much. And another question for you guys. Is there someone in the NHS Trust that can indicate to us how well the Trust are already set up, i.e. percentage of readiness?
I think that's really difficult. Each Trust is on a journey and each Trust is at a different point. There is no overarching, this Trust is at this point. So for example, at Leeds, we are Peppol ready, we are running catalogues, we are running inventory. We know that some of our colleagues, they do have inventory systems, but their inventory systems are not as well developed. So it is a case of trying your procurement departments, speaking with your contacts in them and seeing where that team is up to.
Thanks for that, Mark. Okay, interesting question. I think we'll make this the last question as time is ticking on. Is tracking patients' locations legal?
That's a very interesting question. We track them for their point of their care, and we have to know where our patients are. If you don't know where our patients are, we don't know our bed capacity. If we have a problem, for example, we had a fire in an accident and emergency department, if we don't know where our patients are, we will not know where they are to make sure that we've got everybody out. So yes, it is legal because it is our duty of care to know where those patients are.
Fantastic. Okay, we are out of time for Q&A. Thank you very much, Mark and Danny.
Thank you.
And back over to you, George, to introduce the next session.
Thanks, Chris. So our next session is presented to you by Biode Adisa from the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency on medical device regulation and the MHRA registration system. So over to you, Biode.
Hello, good morning, everybody. My name is Biode Adisa, and I work as a Devices Data and Surveillance Strategy Manager at the MHRA. And today I'll be talking to you about medical device regulation in the UK, and I'll also touch on the MHRA devices registration system. Okay, so this is the agenda for my presentation. So there are a few other topics that I'll be touching on, but I'll start with providing an overview of UK medical device regulation. I'll then touch on UDI requirements in both Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and I'll introduce the Medicines and Medical Devices Act as well. I'll also then go to talk about the devices registration system, and I'll close with, I'll give a summary of the importance of including UDI in both MHRA safety communications and manufacturer safety communications as well. Okay, so most of you probably already know that the transition period between the UK and the EU ended on the 31st of December 2020. So we're currently in a 2.5-year standstill period where there is different regulation that applies in Great Britain and Northern Ireland due to the Northern Ireland Protocol. So Northern Ireland will continue to have access to the EU single market and will align with EU rules for medical devices. So we now have a situation where the regulation in both regions is different. So in Great Britain, the EU MDR and IVDR as well will not be implemented. However, in Northern Ireland, both the EU MDR and IVDR will be implemented according to the EU timelines. So the MDR actually, the application date for the MDR was the 26th of May 2021. So the MDR actually applies in Northern Ireland currently. So back to Great Britain. So the MHRA will continue to recognise CE marking until the 30th of June 2023. However, from the 1st of July 2023, a UK CA mark will be required in order to place a device on the GB market. And where third-party conformity assessment is required, a UK approved body is needed. And manufacturers at the moment can use the UK CA mark on a voluntary basis until 30th of June 2023. After that, it would actually be a legal requirement. And approved bodies also can now conduct assessments for the UK CA mark. So in Northern Ireland, the situation is slightly different. So the devices that are placed on the market in Northern Ireland must be CE marked or CE UK NI marked. And a CE UK NI is applied where a UK notified body is used for the conformity assessment process. So I think currently in the UK, I don't think there are any notified bodies that have been designated to apply the UK NI mark, but we expect this to change over the next coming months. So in terms of legislation in the UK, the medical devices are regulated in the UK under the UK Medical Device Regulations 2002. And this includes specific requirements for the UK, for example, regarding the registration of devices. And the UK MDR is based on existing EU legislation. So the directives, the Active Implantable Medical Device Directive, the Medical Device Directive, and the IVD Directive. However, the Medicines and Medical Devices Act, which gained royal assent in February this year, allows us to amend the UK MDR 2002, and it includes a number of provisions. So it will enable the MHRA to consolidate enforcement provisions. The Act also introduces civil sanctions. It allows for enhanced data sharing across the healthcare arena, and it also enables the creation of a devices register, which will be run by the MHRA, and also a medical device information system, which will be run by NHSD. And I'm going to talk about that in more detail later on in the presentation. So this slide basically lays out our ambition for building a future regulatory system in Great Britain. So as I mentioned previously, the Medicines and Medical Device Act is now in force. And we've already actually started informal consultation with a range of different stakeholders. So we've talked to trade associations, we've spoken to a patient forum as well. We've engaged with our clinical experts just to find out the views from these stakeholders, that what would they like to see in our future regulation? What aspects would they like to include? And this includes aspects like what UDI issuing agencies should be designated in Great Britain. We also plan to embark in a formal public consultation, so later this year, which I really encourage you all to participate in. Further information about the public consultation will be on the website, will be coming on the website soon. So please, when it does come out, please do engage. We're keen to hear your thoughts on the future regulation of medical devices in Great Britain. And by early 2023, we'll be in a situation where we can agree a position and finalize secondary legislation regarding medical devices in GB. So by July 2023, we will stop recognition of CE marking in GB, and we would have created a new medical device regulatory framework, which will prioritize patient safety. And while we're going through this process, we will take into consideration international standards and global harmonization. But the main thing I think I would want to draw out in this slide is please be involved when formal public consultation starts. We are keen to hear your views. Okay, so I'm now going to touch on UDI requirements in both GB and Northern Ireland. Probably guessed UDI requirements in GB and NI are different. So I'll start with a definition firstly of UDIs, which I'm sure you all already aware of, so I'm not going to read it out. But I think one thing that I'd like to highlight is that one thing that I think is the beauty of UDI is that it allows for an ambiguous identification of a specific device on the market. And I think this was clearly illustrated by Mark, where he presented a slide where there was 3 different devices which each had the same catalog number. This would not happen with UDI. And I think this is one of the strengths of UDI. So UDI is made up of 2 components. It's made out of composed of the UDI DI, the UDI device identifier, which is specific to a manufacturer and a device. And it's also composed of a UDI production identifier, which identifies the unit of device production. And this includes things like lot number and expiry date. So this slide basically just translates how the GS1 standard meets UDI requirements. So you can see that the UDI DI, the solution in the GS1 standard, is a global trade item number. Production identifiers in the GS1 standard are referred to as application identifiers. You've probably seen a barcode on the bottom of a device which has several prefixes and has numbers after that. So for example, for a lot number, the prefix 10 would be included in brackets and the lot number would follow. So as I said, DI plus PI equal UDI, and in the GS1 standard, it's a GTIN plus the application identifiers equals the UDI. And GS1 have also created a solution for the basic UDI DI, and that's the global model number. So what are the exact requirements in Northern Ireland? This slide basically highlights that. So the first thing is manufacturers must assign UDIs to all of the medical devices and IVDs before they place them on the market. There are a few device groups that are exempt from this, and this is custom-made devices and devices that are involved in like clinical trials, so haven't got a CE mark or So UDIs should be placed on device labels in machine readable format and also in plain text. And UDIs should be used for reporting serious incidents and field safety corrective actions. So they should be included in field safety notices that manufacturers issue. It also should be referenced in information provided to patients who have received an implant. So this is implant cards, and this can be a physical copy or an electronic copy. And that basically gives the patient information about devices that they have received. And it also should be included in technical and regulatory documentation. And this is specifically relevant for the basic UDI. So UDI should be stored by manufacturers, importers, distributors, and hospitals. The requirement for economic operators and hospitals is that Class 3 implantable devices should be recorded by these institutions. And lastly, manufacturers should submit UDI data to the UDIMED database. And the next slide basically highlights some of the timelines. This, I'm not going to go through every single deadline, but I think main things I would like to highlight is that UDI assignment for all classes of devices was required by the 26th of May 2021. And submission of UDI core elements to UDIMED is required 24 months after UDIMED becomes fully functional. So we're now in a situation, as we've reached the 26th of May 2021 deadline, where implantable devices and Class 3 devices should all have UDI assigned to them, and the UDI should also appear on the barcodes of, on the device labels. So all of these devices that are entering the EU market or NI market should be labeled with UDIs. In 2 years' time, we'll also be in that same situation with Class 2A and 2B devices. In terms of IVDs, UDI assignment for all classes of IVDs is required by 26th May 2022. In terms of the placement of UDIs on the device labels, it will be a requirement for Class D IVDs by the 26th of May 2023. So these are things like HIV tests and fall under this category. So now moving to Great Britain, what are the requirements in Great Britain? So currently, there are no specific requirements in the 2002 medical device regulations regarding UDIs. However, as you know, as Mark has mentioned, the NHS has been requesting the use of UDIs for some time now, but currently in the regulations, there's no current requirements regarding UDIs. However, using the powers within the Medicines and Medical Devices Act, MHRA really looked to improve the traceability of medical devices. And there's two main ways that I think this will be done. First of all, it's through the MHRA Medical Devices Register, which can be found, I think, in clause 16 of the Medicines and Medical Devices Act, and that will capture information, so master data, about all medical devices available on the UK market. So we'll capture information on the devices, but also the manufacturers who manufacture those devices. So this register will capture UDI DIs only. Production identifiers such as lot number will not be captured in this MHRA system. The Medicines and Medical Devices Act also introduces the NHSD Medical Device Information System, which will facilitate the tracking of high-risk medical devices to a patient's individual record. So it will collect and store information linking a UDI to patient, to the clinician who implanted or used the device, and a specific surgical procedure where the device was implanted. So this system will capture the full UDI, so it will capture both DIs and PIs. So just trying to change the slide. No, yeah. And this slide basically just lays out our aspirations for the Medical Devices Register. And our aspiration really, the aspiration of the MHRA, is that the Medical Device Register will be a central source of key device information and safety information for patients, healthcare providers, and other key sectors of the UK health community. And our ambition is to create a system that will be publicly accessible and interrogatable. So we want these organizations that you can see referenced here to be able to even download information from our register and input it into their local systems. I think one of the main beneficiaries or the key beneficiaries to this register will be patients. Patients equipped with an implant card will be able to look at the UDI DI on their device, type it into the MHRA register, and find out, for example, if their device is MRI compatible, if it contains latex. In the same way, healthcare institutions will be able to download information from the system and identify, for example, the IFU for the product, so have like quick access to the IFU for the product. Look at the critical indications for the device. It will provide, like, the register will provide like really useful device information to a range of different stakeholders. I think one of the other key stakeholders is the NHS Digital Medical Device Information System, which I mentioned earlier. So our ambition is to feed data from our register to the medical device information system, which will facilitate the auto-population of fields. So potentially, once a UDI is scanned, the manufacturer potentially will be able to come up from data that we hold on our system. So this will actually also save times for clinicians entering data into MDIS. The register will also be a key tool for the local MHRA systems, and we're quite excited really by this concept. Okay, I'm now going to touch on the MHRA devices registration system. So this is the current system that we have in place at the moment. So there's quite a few changes that were introduced in January 2021. So prior to January 2021, there were certain groups of devices that needed to be registered with the MHRA. So class 1 devices, custom-made devices, and IVDs. However, from January of this year, it's been a requirement for all devices, irrespective of device class, to be registered with the MHRA before they are placed on the market in Great Britain. The MHRA recognised that this was quite a big shift for manufacturers, so we introduced grace periods for when manufacturers would need to comply. So the first deadline was the 1st of May 2021, where it was a legal requirement for manufacturers of Class 3 medical devices, Class 2B implantables and active implantable devices, and also IVD List A products to register their devices with the MHRA. So also, manufacturers who are based in the UK would be able to submit this information directly to the MHRA system, but manufacturers that are not based in the UK would need to appoint a UK responsible person to submit this information to us. So now we are approaching the next deadline, which is September 2021. And at this point, it will be a legal requirement for Class 2B non-implantable medical devices, Class 2A devices, IVD List B products, and self-test IVDs to be registered with the MHRA prior to them being placed on the GB market. And the MHRA will then find ourselves in a situation that by the 1st of January next year, all classes of devices will be registered with the MHRA. The next slide details some of the information that is captured in our current device registration system. So this is not an exhaustive list. An exhaustive list can be shared, can be found on the MHRA website, and I've got a link to that, which is coming up shortly. But the device registration system captures a vast array of information. It captures device identifier information. So for example, the device catalog or reference number, the model number, also captures the UDI and the basic UDI as well. It also captures the nomenclature code as well for the device, and we are currently capturing the GMDN code and term, and this shouldn't be confused with the basic UDI, which is used to identify device models. Because we recently identified that a few people are confusing GMDN and basic UDI. The risk class of the device also is captured, and you can see that currently in our system, not all fields are mandatory. Some are optional, such as the UDI-DI and the basic UDI. And one thing I would like to stress here is that even though it's optional at present, I would strongly encourage you to, if you do have this information, I was really interested by the survey to see that 80% of manufacturers on this call had already assigned GTINs to their products. So if you have already assigned GTINs to your products and you place them on device labels, please submit this information to us. It's not a legal requirement due to our regulatory framework, but as we build and create legislation, this field will become mandatory, so that in the future you will potentially need to go back to the record and update this information. So I would strongly encourage you to submit this information now, because it is useful to us. And the last thing I'll just probably stress in that presentation, in that slide, is that our registration system does not include any production identifiers. So this is the last topic I'm going to cover in this presentation, and it's basically about the importance of UDI inclusion in safety communications. So now that the MDR applies in Northern Ireland and the EU, it's actually a requirement now for UDIs to be included in FSNs. And in 2017, and we updated the guidance later in 2019, the GS1 Healthcare User Group, which has representatives from the MHRA, from industry, from the healthcare industry as well, produced some guidance, basically, which stated that UDI should be included in field safety corrective actions, and they should be included in electronic lists instead of PDFs. Because we've all probably seen a situation where there's FSNs with numerous pages of device information, all detailed in a PDF, which is difficult to extract and difficult to use. And we wanted to make the process of conducting a recall more efficient, more effective, so that hospitals can identify affected products quickly and remove them from hospital shelves. Also to enable hospitals to be able to identify patients who've been implanted with affected devices, and then therefore can receive the clinical follow-up that they need if that's recommended in the communication. So the guidance was focused to manufacturers, but also the MHRA also committed to including this UDI device and header spreadsheet in the communications that we issue as well. So here is an example of the GS1 UDI device and header spreadsheet, which can be found in the guidance and which we are recommending that manufacturers use when they're issuing an FSN. And it basically includes information such as the device identifier, so the GTIN, and the product description, the date of manufacturer, and it has quite extensive table notes, which kind of dictates the kind of structure and the format should be used, so that a consistent format will be used by all manufacturers. There's also a header tab, which includes the global location number. So we're asking for the global location number from manufacturers as well. As there are a number of UDI issuing entities that are in operation in GB and Northern Ireland, we've also got a HIBIC UDI device and header spreadsheet, which again has a similar format, but the table notes and the rules are different. And the spreadsheets that you're seeing now, these spreadsheets were updated due to feedback that we'd received from hospitals and from manufacturers. And one of the main changes was the inclusion of validations in the spreadsheet. For example, in the GS1 spreadsheet, you'll be able to, if a GTIN which is not 14 digits in length is entered, the cell will be flagged up in red. So then the manufacturer is then aware that there's an error in the spreadsheet. So I think the last page, which I think has already come up, this is an example of an FSN that was issued by a manufacturer. So this is the product information in the FSN. And as you can see, there's page upon page upon page of device information, which is in a format which is not really user-friendly and usable. And our key aim with this guidance was to create a situation where Excel spreadsheet is used, where hospitals can import the data in the spreadsheet into their hospital inventory management system and quickly identify devices that have been supplied to them. And I strongly recommend manufacturers that are present on this call just to really familiarize yourself with the guidance. If you can, start using the device and header spreadsheet. It will save hospitals time. It will identify affected devices quicker and will protect patient safety, and it's in the interest of patient safety. So yeah, it's a strong plea to please familiarize with the guidance and implement it. Okay, I think I'm on the final slide. So I think this is everything that I wanted to cover in terms of material. This next page, you don't need to take notes as you're going to be provided with the slide deck afterwards. But as mentioned, the website includes a list of all of the fields that are captured in our registration system. And I would say during the consultation, if there's any aspects or fields that you think we should be capturing that we're not, or something we should be capturing in our register, please do let us know, as we really want to hear your views. And if you've got any inquiries about the regulatory framework and the plans for the future, please send your emails to, there's an inquiry help desk as well, which is on the previous slide. So thank you so much for listening. Do you have any questions? Andy Crosby and I are happy to address any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bayode, for that informative update on medical device regulations and UDI requirements in Great Britain and Northern Ireland. We've had loads of questions.
Oh, really?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is good that we've got, and we anticipated this, so we've got that follow-up session on the 29th. That will give us time to look at the questions and prepare the answers. We do have some time now for one question. If devices are manufactured overseas and are currently CE marked, does the overseas manufacturer need to register with a UK notified body to gain a UK CE mark? Or does the nominated UK responsible person need to arrange for the UK CE mark on behalf of the manufacturer?
Okay, well, we are still recognising the UK, so the CE mark until 2023. I think it's June 2023. So potentially devices can still be placed in the GB market using the CE mark. However, in terms of registration of the device with the MHRA, because the manufacturer is based outside of the UK, they would need to appoint a UK responsible person to register the devices with us. Andy, is there anything you want to add on that?
No, I think that's right. I think I was looking through the questions while you were talking, Baudi, and there's a lot of questions about quite a lot of detail about what will be required in the final UK regulations. And just to emphasise what Baudi said during our talk, we don't know that yet because the UK regulations are currently out for consultation and to be further drafted. So at the moment, we're working in a hybrid system, which is somewhere between the CE marking system and where we might be going. But a lot of the very detailed answers to these kinds of questions we're not going to be able to give until we know what the final UK regulations, sorry, the final GB regulations say.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was my certainly my understanding. And there are a few other questions that perhaps we can answer on our session on the 29th. But you're absolutely right. Yeah, nobody knows just yet. Okay, so right. So let me see if I think we've got time for one more question. I'm just seeing which ones have been voted up. Okay, perhaps this is appropriate given the limited number of cabs in the UK. When will the MHRA be able to publish a list of EU-based notified bodies who are intending to open the UK as cabs?
Yeah, I mean, yet again, that's going to be subject to what the final regulations say, exactly how that. I mean, I think that you're going to get that. And when we have the session on the 29th, we're going to be saying that to a lot of these questions. You're asking us to speculate on what the future UK regs say when we don't actually know what they are. I don't think it's very likely that a European notified body will European approving body will essentially be accepted in the UK system per se, but it could well be that organisations will be able to operate under both frameworks, as for example BSI is doing now. BSI is already a European notified body, and we're assuming they will also be a UK body in due course. So we can only tell you about where we think things are going. We won't be able to tell you exactly the answers to these questions until the regulations are done and dusted.
Yeah, I'm looking through all of the questions, and I think you're absolutely right there, Andy. Is that there's very few that can be answered today. There may be a few that can be answered on the 29th, but of course we'll make every effort to ensure that happens. Okay, so break time. We are due to restart the first session at 11:05. Please be back in good time. Don't close the Zoom session, as you may not get back in. We are not at capacity, but we are very close to it. And if people are logging in specifically just for that particular session, you may lose your place. So go and get yourselves a cup of tea, cup of coffee, a biscuit, and join us back here at just before 11:05, so we can get started promptly on time. Thank you very much, everybody. Welcome back, everybody. By my clock, it's 11:05, so we are about to get restarted. Before I do, I just want to say that we've had lots and lots of questions, and lots of them will be it'd be more appropriate to answer on our future webinars, part of the Q&A panel, or in the Q&A document that we'll share with you afterwards. So just so I can actually manage these, I will be dismissing these. Doesn't mean that they're being dismissed. It just means they come off the list, but they will be answered. So over to you, George.
Thanks, Chris. So our next session is from Mark East from Smith & Nephew, and Mark is providing the supplier perspective on unique device identification. Over to you, Mark.
Hello everyone, can you see me? Yeah, what I'd like to talk about today is, Smith & Nephew's journey. It's been a 4 or 5 year journey today. And I hope you're all well and safe, and thanks to those presenters this morning, because it's not always easy, certainly in front of a crowd of around 800. So thank you very much for everyone that's joining. I'm Mark East. I'm Programme Manager for UDI, Global Advanced Wound Management for Smith & Nephew, covering over 1,000 products, and I've been working on this for 4 or 5 years now. So I'd like to move on. Yeah, so I'd like to be introduced to, Smith & Nephew, understand what we do. And more importantly, UDI custom and regulatory requirement for advanced wound management franchise and how we meet them. The supplier perspective, as a supplier, we have to meet these requirements and find the route forward to deliver on requirements. And then that transfers to equipment design and ideation. And then I'd like to speak a little bit about lessons learned, because we can't do these things without understanding what might go wrong, what might go right, and understanding how we put that right as we go forward. So an introduction to Smith & Nephew. We run 3 global franchises: orthopedics, sports medicine, and ENT, advanced wound management. We employ around 18,000 employees globally, and we are on the FTSE 100. And our annual revenue is 4.6 billion. This is a slide that I'd like to share, and I've picked some points that I'd like to share with you, because often the companies start small and grow larger thanks to those great customers that we have across the globe. Thomas James Smith in 1856 opened a small shop, a chemist shop in Hull, UK, developing cod liver oil, which, as we all know, cod was pretty big in those days. Horatio Smith, his nephew, joined partnership to form TJ Smith & Nephew. In 1914, World War I, Smith & Nephew received an order from the French army and delivered in 5 months the first wound dressing. And during that period, staff grew from 50 to 1,200. I'd like you to please take a look at this. I'm sure it'll be shared afterwards, because I can't talk through the whole journey, and that's not what today's about. But the reality is, I've picked one point out here. One of our products, Pico, the first pocket-sized, single-use, single negative wound pressure device. Fantastic. Great device, and provides, great things for people to make their lives better. And something I wanted to read out at the bottom of this is our pillars of strategy, and what we truly believe in is we exist to restore people and their self-belief by using technology to take their limits off living. We can call this our purpose, life unlimited, and that's something I know that is deep in our philosophy at Smith & Nephew. I just wanted to share that with you. Thank you. So how do we deliver this against the UDI customer and regulatory requirements? How do we meet them? So this is not done by reading lots of pieces of paper or or being on the internet with people. You know, we need to engage in understanding regulatory requirements for UDI, reading white papers, mandates, you know, engaging with GS1. You know, that has been so important, and I'm not calling this out because it's a GS1 conference, but seriously, it's there as a benchmark for what we do. And of course, regulatory bodies. Multiple visits to the NHS trusts, really enjoyed those, you know, jumping in the car and going to these and seeing the reality of how it works and what people are trying to achieve in this. And of course, Mark mentioned earlier on that, you know, this is moving forward and it's the future, so we'll embrace that. We practiced our products, our real products, in our small first generation items, and I'm pleased to say that our results passed. So that was a little bit of a test period for us. And of course, we go through ongoing networking with the NHS and any seminar that's offered to us, really, because I think that's important to engage, to receive information. And as you can see, there's some pictures in there that describe. I'll just go back one step. You can see some pictures here that describe the patient band and the order in which we scan things, as Mark described earlier on. Thank you. The next slide describes that we go through, as we all do, we need to plan against timelines. Some come further forward than most, but the reality is there's wording within each one that we need to understand, and the relationship between those markets, and that's what we do. But I'm pleased to say that we're in front of that, and I'm going to tell you how we did that. Okay, so more importantly, around the supplier perspective, as a supplier, how do we approach that? Now, this is quite wordy, but in essence, what we did was we looked at the attitude of meeting separate requirements, but we've got over maybe 40 different manufacturing sites around the world, and rather than cherry pick individual SKUs against different timelines, we felt it was probably better as an organization to invest in those sites well ahead of those targets. And so what we call it is a one-touch approach. We upgrade an asset, we invest in that asset, we teach the organization how to be UDI compliant and deliver on that basis, so that all SKUs on that asset, that equipment, and I've got some videos to show as well, are UDI compliant, because a mixture of those might be FDA, might be NHS, and then obviously some long-reaching regulations. So it just felt good business sense to invest in front, really. So we developed a strong worldwide working relationship. We obviously have an extended network, different languages. We taught people what UDI is about. We developed a bespoke SAP interface for auto-population of UDI software. This was a business decision to really sort of bolt down the concerns of manual intervention with, because the reality is, if we get one code wrong or one GTIN wrong, then that then translates through to the end user. So what I can say is that it was over 600 lines of text, coding, months and months, years of development, which I'm going to show you some videos of that. And one thing was, what was important, because we had so many sites, we developed a standardized equipment sort of specification. It was we called it like the gold standard, to put a full UDI in place rather than just meet the minimum requirement. We felt, well, what future markets are probably going to need the full UDI, so let's put that in place at the beginning. And I know that there's people on this call who will probably understand the risk in doing less than that. So I'll move on. Thank you. So you can't do this without collaboration. I could have maybe shared a different graphic to this, but I did a quick calculation, and there's probably around 1,500 people that have been involved with this, and that's external suppliers of equipment, it's internal QA systems, it's change control, it's validation, it's change control leads, You know, you can read it for yourself, you can see it for yourself on the screen, that you can't do it without the buy-in of everybody. And I know that sometimes happens within a normal organization, that these people come into play, but it's a big spider's web, I can tell you. And I've enjoyed building that network to be able to deliver this program successfully. So I'm going to go on a little bit about equipment design and ideation, because I think that's a key point for whoever might be on the journey right now. But more to the point is, you know, if you're in front or behind, you know, the regulatory compliance, you know, seeing the reality of how you actually apply the print and you control the print and how you get to that, and the offer that's made at the time is quite important and quite close to my heart. And that's the bit I've enjoyed about this project, working with those people that have helped develop that along with Smith & Nephew. So how did that work then? So I made some notes on top of what I've showed here, but I did reach out to over 10 UDI potential suppliers, and it was very much in a back room, you know, a couple of colleagues. We didn't even know what UDI was about. Googled it, you know, did this was maybe 5 years ago. Attended packaging exhibitions, you know, we did small scale trials on filtered suppliers. We did lots of trials. We used lots of products to try and prove what we might achieve and not achieve. And I'm really pleased to say that we actually landed with a bespoke supplier. It was the right thing to do for Smith & Nephew to develop a bespoke system that delivered not only compliance, but control and how can I say it in the best way? It was, as soon as you input something, it maps it all the way through, right from the start to the end. And again, I'm going to show you some videos. And I can say that, you know, that supply was phenomenal all the way through this. And I'm pleased that we went that route rather than have a mixture of suppliers. Of course, we engaged in, I've placed it on here, Microscan, Omron as some global leaders for verification inspection, but the integrator was really helpful in delivering that whole journey. Okay. So I've shared some images here. Bespoke UDI software. Again, I've spoke about being able to buy, you know, purchase, you know, off-the-shelf products, but what I was seeing at the time, our team was seeing, is that they delivered parts of the project. They delivered, you know, either printing or inspection of the code, or they delivered one part of it. It was in the early stages of UDI intervention globally, and we said, well, let's just grab the bull by the horns and develop something that it works, it delivers. And so we developed a bespoke UDI operating system, which controls not only input but control of the printer interface, and then also all the way through our Smith & Nephew process to say that the end product is compliant to what is expected from the customer, that meets compliance. Okay, so I have said compliance quite a few times, but yeah, and all of that printing can be done, but in essence, we need to verify that to make sure it meets GS1 compliance. And as you can see on the left-hand top, there's various pieces of equipment that our operators within the network can see and use to test the grading. We've got inline grading systems that automatically have feedback systems that inform our operations on whether it's compliant or not, and auto reject systems. So that's really good to see. And I just want to call out the picture in the middle. You know, some of our wider networks include global supply chains, and some of the evidence I received of proof of training, that was a group of people around a screen watching the training. So that's one of my favorites. Right, move on. Yeah. Okay, so this is an example of some of our prints. I have shared these with the NHS. We have visited the NHS. We have tested some of these, but you can see this is probably normal to most people. But I wanted to show this as being that printing a UDI isn't just a one substrate. It can be on a pouch of 15 different substrates. It can be on a carton. It can be on a label, different size cartons. It's a real challenge for all. But you know what? We've got through that, and we understand the pitfalls. And if anyone ever needs any advice on that, then feel free to contact me. Okay, so I've got some videos of some equipment that I'd like to show. So this is showing the operator scanning our automatic SAP input, which controls the variable data, what is going to appear on the product. They're inputting the quantity on the batch. And of course, all of this is locked down so that it's within our system templates globally for what that expects to be seen on the template. We then thought we'd put a material check in there. So the actual carton that the operator's got in their hand meets with that. We had some fun delivering this piece of equipment, but we decided to go for a very automated process to not only print our cartons, inspect our cartons because of high volume. You can see it's going through the print station, inspect station. It then goes for a reject station if there is one code found to an issue. And for anyone who might have questions, the reason why we might find an issue there is the odd instance where a carton may just misload or be in the wrong position, but it's there as our guardian, really. This is another video where we're showing the system again. See that the operator gets a full system check, removes any human error, scans the carton, scans the pouch material, 100% scanning of the code. Again, machine stops, rejected if that code is found to be incorrect. So then what we've got here is we've got an end of line. It's like a supermarket shopping area. So what we decided to do is to prove the marriage between the pouch and carton, because there is a very, very low risk that the operator, due to high volume, places the pouch into the wrong carton. It's very, very unlikely, but we thought, if we're going to do this, then let's make it 100% robust. You can see the operators getting hold of, placing them into the carton, packing them. This is pretty nifty. We slide it over. You'll see it in the next part. Is when it's completed, to slide it over a camera. You can see a small slit in the center of that table. That table was already designed for the operator. Place it over that. And it scans both the pouch and carton to show the full marriage of that. And that's a product then ready to ship with a full UDI. Great, thank you for that. That worked well. Right, next slide. Are we able to move this on, Natasha? Okay, so lessons learned then. I always believe in lessons learned. So I'm just trying, yeah. So what I would say with any of this, anybody who's integrating UDI into a manufacturing facility is expect the unexpected, yeah? Different materials, optimization all the time. Make sure that you fully validate everything, because there's different substrates, there's different pieces of paper. If you get an ink pen and you write on a blotting paper, it's going to spill. Yeah. So I can only say that we've been through a lot of testing to make sure we've got optimization ready. Explore many options with suppliers. Whilst we settled with a great sort of external provider for this, is that we needed to make the right choices and understand that we didn't sign up to what was best offered, but what we felt was right and was going to deliver the best solution. Sorry. No one system fits all. There's always slight tweaks depending on the size of the print, size of the carton, all the rest of it. As we all know, manufacturing has variance. But more importantly, partner up with those that are needed. Don't go it alone. Don't be in a back room. Speak to people. Share with people. I'd love to put my name on somewhere on the internet and say, I know a little bit about UDI. Do you want to come and talk to me? But I have to call out GS1 Partnership. Chris and his team have been instrumental in debugging some of those obscure questions around how we might template something, how that might meet a regulation. And I seriously have not put that there because it says GS1 is, kudos to GS1 that's what fits the regulation and that's what's good. And build a stakeholder and working group as early as possible. Program requires rigorous project management. I can tell you I'm under the cosh all the time to present where we're at with the projects and making sure that we're compliant. Understand regulatory requirements. There's no point doing it if you don't know where you're at with something. Do not underestimate the volume of change. I've said tens of thousands of actions of approvals, but I think I did a rough count with my team, and we're looking at around 12,000 document approvals as part of this up to date. Engage with the customer. We've been out there and we've spoke with people and said, does this work? Is this what you want? And okay, in the future, we may need to do that more. But more importantly, work with your colleagues. Coaching the use of benefits of UDI. I'd like to see some share on what we've all seen today and in the wider group in operations. And that concludes my presentation. So thank you very much for listening. I'll welcome any questions.
Thank you, Mark. That was really, really interesting, and a clear message that engagement and partnering with relevant organisations is absolutely key and has been for your journey. So thank you. Chris, I'll hand over to you to see if there are any questions for Mark.
There are, and thank you for actually pointing out that the question is for Mark. Thank you. Is it possible to tell us what percentage of revenue you spent on your UDI project?
Oh, well, that would be confidential. Unfortunately, I can't, but what I can say, well, I need to be careful what I say, it's considerable. And that spans over, capital investment. As you can imagine, these bespoke pieces of equipment over 30 sites, it's a considerable figure. And sometimes, cost over quality as well comes into play. Unfortunately, I can't give you a figure, but I don't even want to put a zero on it, but it's pretty huge. But it's future-proofing. We decided that from the off. But thanks for the question. I hope that answers it.
Yeah, I had a feeling you wouldn't be able to give them a figure, but at least to get a flavour and also an indication of just how much resource was put into this project to make it right.
Yeah,
There is another question, but I think I can probably answer this one. Can the serialisation equipment for EU Falsified Medicines Directive for medicinal products be adapted to UDI scanning and verification, or should we need new equipment? Now, I'm no expert in this area, but I'm an expert in the GS1 standards. And if you're using GS1 standards for EU FMD, then it probably would be quite straightforward to adapt what you're already doing for that for the UDIs, because it uses GTINs, it uses the same GS1 application identifiers that you use within the barcodes. The barcode would be the same, it'd be a GS1 data matrix, and that meets the requirement as well. So I reckon, Victoria, that absolutely it will be adaptable.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that, which is why I think we adopted the approach of an interface, and if that comes to play, then I'm sure we can switch our software to meet that requirement, which is why we didn't want restricted software. We wanted something that we could develop in time, confident that we could move to that next phase if we need to.
Great. Okay, that's as many questions I have for you at this time, Mark. So thank you very much, and I'll hand back over to George. A little bit ahead of schedule, I believe.
Yes, thanks, Chris. We have our penultimate session now from Steve Graham from Open Peppol and Anna Micklewright from Pagero. And Steve and Anna will be presenting on the use of Peppol and GS1 standards from now. So over to you, Steve.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Hopefully the sound and vision is working okay.
All good, Steve.
And can I advance the slides? Yes, I can. So good. Well, many thanks to GS1 for organising this event. I think it's been really successful so far, and hopefully everybody's getting some value from the session. My name's Steve Graham. I'm the Market Development Lead at Open Peppol. For those that don't know me, I used to work at the Department of Health, and I wrote the NHS e-procurement strategy and set up and led the Scan for Safety programme. So we wanted to talk about how Open Peppol works. Firstly, I think it's helpful to draw the distinction between Peppol and Open Peppol. You see these words and it can cause confusion. So Peppol is what we do. And actually, you'll notice here that Peppol is in lowercase. A lot of times, and in fact, on the agenda, it's here today. It's appeared in uppercase, and actually, that's changed now. So it's in lowercase. So Peppol is what we do, and what we do is to integrate business processes by standardising the way information is structured and exchanged. So Peppol is the name of the network that we have, and the specifications that we provide, and this all fits in to a comprehensive interoperability framework, and that includes legal agreements, governance arrangements, and compliance measures. So that's what we do. Open Peppol is who we are, and Open Peppol was established in 2012. It followed a large-scale pilot that was co-funded by the European Commission and 18 other government agencies, and it was driven to address e-invoicing and cross-border public procurement. Open Peppol is a not-for-profit democratic member-led international association established in Belgian law, and it's says here 464. It's actually now gone up to 473 members from the public and the private sector and from 39 countries. So that's who we are and what we do. It's useful, I think, to understand the different actors in the Peppol world. So the stakeholders that we have fall into three categories. So end users, sometimes they get called participants, Peppol participants, and these are buyers and sellers that are sending and receiving business documents. So in the world of the NHS, hospitals as buyers and suppliers as sellers. So obviously exchanging various documents all the time, invoices, purchase orders, advice notes, and potentially other documents as well. End users can be members of Open Peppol, but they're not required to be, and that's sometimes something that people misunderstand. So to be able to send a Peppol message as an end user, you don't need, or to receive, you don't actually need to be a member of Open Peppol. And then we have service providers, and again, these get different names, but sometimes they're called access points or SMP providers. And these are the businesses that enable the interoperability between end users over the Peppol network using the Peppol interoperability specifications, which are called the Peppol BIS. So the service providers are very key, and in fact, the largest majority group in the membership by some distance are the service providers. And for them, it's they have to become members of Open Peppol. And I'll talk at the end a little bit about some of the entry requirements for them. And then we have Peppol authorities, and these are government agencies. We have 15 from 15 different countries around the world. The Department of Health and Social Care in the UK is a Peppol authority, although perhaps it's fair to say that it's not terribly active at the moment. And the role of a Peppol authority is to drive the adoption of Peppol within their jurisdiction. And again, it's essential that Peppol authorities are members of Open Peppol. So those are the stakeholder groups. If we look at the evolution, so not quite as impressive as the Smith and Nephew timeline going back a century and a half, but here we go. So we were established, well, the project started in 2008 when it was an EU large-scale pilot. And then at 2012, it Open Peppol became established. Quite a lot of stuff on here on this timeline, don't propose to go through it all. But in terms of membership numbers, we had from 2013 to 2018, the numbers went up by 5 times. And from 2013 to now, it's gone up by nearly 10 times. So, you know, a very good growth in terms of adoption, membership numbers, and therefore adoption of Peppol standards. And this is increasingly happening around the world. In 2018, Singapore became the first Peppol authority outside Europe. We have Australia, we have New Zealand, and we're currently working very closely with Japan, who are hopefully going to become a Peppol authority later this year. So increasing levels of adoption around the world. The trajectory keeps on going. And I guess it does that for a reason. So this is a list of the countries where the members are based. So you can see pretty good coverage. Probably the biggest bit is the bit in the middle in Europe, and that's where the origins are, and that's where the majority of members are located. But as we can see, it's beginning to increase around the world. So to try and understand how Peppol works, there's 3 pillars really important to kind of get a grip of. So firstly, the specifications, what we call Peppol Biz, and this is the content of a document and the format of a document that is exchanged between service providers on behalf of end users. And these are very detailed specifications that apply to a number of business documents, and the number of documents increases as time goes by. So it becomes a more and more comprehensive means for businesses to exchange documents between each other in an interoperable way. And by interoperability, it's always important to define what we mean by that. And for me, interoperability is the output of one system causing an action in another system. So if we think in terms of ordering, a hospital creates a purchase order in its system, it then has to arrive in the sales order processing system of a supplier, and Peppol enables that to be done in an automated fashion, end to end, without any interference if everything's done correctly. So no human intervention required, providing all the setup is done. So the interoperability is the key thing, and once you get that machine to machine working across organizations, then you have a real opportunity for business efficiency, not only for orders and invoices, but for many other things. And we maintain and refine and develop the specifications, and we have a release cycle 2 times a year, and that accommodates new requirements as they arise. Then we have the network, and this is the architecture that we utilize, and it allows the service providers who are certified by Peppol to send and receive the documents on behalf of their end users. And then we have, as a third pillar, the governance arrangements, and these are the legal agreements that exist between the different stakeholders, and that defines the rules under which the activity is undertaken and enables us to ensure compliance. And so we'll explore each of those in a little bit more detail. So the Peppol documents that we have currently, it's important to say that they're all based on international standards. So all of the documents use UBL, Universal Business Language, an international standard for this kind of stuff. And then when we look at perhaps say the invoice message type, that conforms with the European invoicing regulations and the VAT directives. So I appreciate that GB is no longer part of Europe, but nevertheless, many of these things are common practices across borders. And in fact, we see with Japan that they will be taking a derivative of the European standard for their invoice specifications. So although very much a European flavour to that, based on the global ISO standards, we then arrive at a set of documents that are currently in production, and you can see here that they fall into two categories. First of all, the pre-award, what we call pre-award. So this is the process that leads up to the agreement of a contract between a buyer and a seller. And so typically in a public sector environment, this will be a tendering exercise, and so the key documents that are exchanged can be exchanged through the Peppol network, and you can see how some of those would apply from the list. And then on the post-award side, we have a group of procurement documents. So we would regard an invoice as a procurement document. Some finance people might not, but nevertheless, that's where we categorise it. So in the post-award phase, after a contract has been agreed, and bear in mind a purchase order can be a contract. So once that has been settled, then there's a whole group of document types that become relevant. So we've mentioned invoice, and along with that goes credit note. We have response messages, order messages, dispatch advice, message level response, so you can confirm that you've had a message received, so that the machine receives a message, it tells the machine that sent it that it got it, so you can close that loop. Catalogs and so on. So quite a group of message types. It's fair to say that around the world the focus has been on invoices. For me personally, with my background in the NHS, the ordering part is also a very significant piece to get right. If you get the order right, then you're probably going to get the invoice right. So these are critical documents that are exchanged routinely every day between buyers and sellers. And of course, there are many more types. So we are looking at logistics messages currently, and we're looking at messages that would support the tax administrations in terms of gathering VAT revenue data, and other things as well. So there's quite a lot of potential, and in theory, any message can be exchanged. So then onto the second pillar, which is the Peppol network, which we describe as a four-corner model. So this is quite an important thing to grasp in the world of Peppol. And the four corners, hopefully you can see on the screens, the little circles with the letters in, or letters number C1, C2, C3, and C4. So these are the four corners. C1 is the sender. So if we talk about an invoice, then that's the supplier. And then the receiver, C4, is the buyer in the case of an invoice. And in the left-hand box, which is a sort of beige color, this is a non-standardized environment. So in this environment, the supplier and the buyer, the sender and the receiver, use the systems that they have. They don't need to buy any new systems. They are able to send a message out of their existing system to a service provider. So again, we've talked about access points before as a service provider. So your access point service provider sitting in corner 2, and that's the service provider that is engaged by corner 1, the sender. Corner 3 is the service provider that is engaged by the receiver. So by having a service provider as an individual organisation, whether you're a buyer or a seller, you then have one service provider that allows you to connect with anybody else, any other end user in the network. So you have one service provider connect once, reach the whole of the Peppol network. So all of the end users that are active, connected through a service provider are all within reach. And of course, there are hundreds of thousands of these around the world. So in the blue box, though, we're in the standardized environment. So this is the world of Peppol. So this is where all the Peppol biz and the rules around the network come into play. And that's what provides the interoperability. So a message comes out of corner 1 in the format that it comes out of the system that is used by corner 1. The service provider at corner 2 then translates that into a Peppol message, sends it to corner 3, who then sends it to corner 4, translating it back into the language that's understood by the systems used by corner 4. In the diagram, we have a couple of extra ingredients. So we have the SML and the SMP. The SML is the only centralized component in the network. So there is one SML wherever you are in the world. And this is like the registry, if you like. So it allows Corner 2, it accesses the SML in real time, dynamically, machines talking to each other. And this allows Corner 2 to find the SMP that is relevant to the end user that's receiving the message. The SMP, there can be many SMPs, and these are kind of, it's a capability registry, if you like. So in the service providers register the capabilities of their end user. So they may say, as an end user, we can receive a purchase order. So that sits in the SMP. So once the service provider at Corner 2 has found the SML, has accessed the SML, found the SMP, it then can find out whether the intended recipient is capable of receiving that message. And if the receiver is capable, then it's sent automatically. All that happens in real time, dynamic discovery process. And it's important that those pieces of the puzzle are present, because otherwise you could end up sending a message into a dead end and nobody would know that it's there, and that would be very problematic. So that kind of explains how it works. The service providers, there's more than 300 of them in the world of Peppol. There's, I think, 28 in the UK. But in theory, any of them, wherever they are in the world, can send the message to any other service provider wherever they are in the world. But as an end user, if you're choosing a service provider, well, there is a list on the Peppol website, which is peppol.eu. You can then find a listing, and that shows you which country every service provider is located in. So you can find very quickly a whole group of service providers, and then you determine which one you want to use. So moving on to the governance structure. So this is, again, very important. When we have this sort of complex world, we need to have rules, and we need to make sure everybody follows those rules. So we have compliance management, and it's driven by this structure. So we have a General Assembly, which is all the members of the association, and that sets the statutes and regulations under which Open Peppol operates. Then Open Peppol has legal agreements with Peppol authorities, and in turn, Peppol authorities have legal agreements with service providers. And then in turn, the service providers have their agreements, commercial agreements with their end users. So those commercial agreements are not regulated by Peppol. The other agreements very much are. So that becomes the kind of legal framework, governance framework, if you like. So those bilateral agreements, very, very important. They are currently going through an update, a revision, and that will actually strengthen the governance structure further than it is already. So that's the third pillar. So quickly wanted to just mention about getting started in Peppol. So for service providers, as we said, they must become members of Open Peppol. They have to participate in the relevant stakeholder community. So they work, in collaboration with their peers. They participate in domain communities. So this could be the pre-award community, the post-award community. They can stand for election to elected positions in the organisation. So managing committee, various other bodies that are elected. And they can participate and influence the development of Peppol. They have to go through conformance testing. They have to pass due diligence tests that we have in Open Peppol, and also further due diligence requirements that the relevant Peppol authority has. So to get started, there's an email address. You contact us, and then we take it from there. So that's for service providers, and I think it's helpful for end users to understand that process, how that works. For end users to get started, well, pretty simply, you select a service provider, and then the service provider takes care of it. As I mentioned, end users not required to become members of Open Peppol, but they are very welcome. They can be members. We have a member category for end users, and we very much, want more end user members So we very much encourage that. And again, that enables end users to participate in the stakeholder community. They can stand for elected positions. We have 2 end users on our managing committee. So very important roles, you know, that we listen and hear what end users require. So again, we encourage people to get involved. Mention that the first and simple step is you select a service provider, and mention that there is a list of those service providers on the website. If anybody would like to find out more about becoming a member, again, they send us a note to the email address and we'll follow that up. So there we are, further information, and at that point I'll hand over to Anna, and then we'll hear a little bit more about the perspective from an Open Peppol service provider.
Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody can hear me okay. So in terms of what I wanted to discuss today, I think a lot of what we've discussed today can sometimes be a little bit abstract and theoretical until we start to do it. So what I wanted to do was give you the opportunity to see a bit of the operational context of Peppol. And to do that, I wanted to talk about the NHS background, NEP, and use some examples of what they've done and really look at what Peppol means in practice. So if we all look at the state of play in terms of the NHS, I've noticed on the attendance today some very old names that I'm very familiar with, but nice to see as well some very new names and some people who haven't yet considered a Peppol access point. So if we look at the state of play in the NHS, it was all very well intentioned in the past, but very convoluted, multi-layered and complex. And in fairness, usually left to the suppliers to pick up the challenge and the duplication of working with different systems. So software suppliers would often gift or sell a solution to a hospital, and then there would be almost a forced encouragement to join that solution. Now, this may have worked out well in the beginning in starting to attract the larger multinationals, but it wasn't sustainable. Every trust had its own solution, its own KPIs, and even its own criteria for success. Each one of these would illustrate a tangible cost to the supplier of satisfying that requirement. And we've seen that in the NHS, be it across how to connect through EDI, how to manage a PIM or the national catalogue and the GDSN. So it's all been quite challenging. And what that meant was that everybody was chasing a different criteria of success. And the one criteria for success that really mattered was lost. And that one criteria is how many suppliers can participate and connect. Because really the theme of what GS1 does and what everything we're about today is around connectivity and interoperability. And that is the key to success, not just for suppliers and for hospitals, but for patients in general. So if we look at the evolution of connectivity here in the UK, we can see what's happened over the years. So to start with, if I go back 15, 20 years, we were dealing with point-to-point systems. So this is where one supplier would link to a particular hospital, very bespoke, very labor intensive, and just not scalable at all. If we go to the middle section, here, you'll see that we moved to a few-to-few model with a single supplier who is a channel between hospitals and suppliers in the UK market. And generally, those solutions aren't cost prohibitive and really only benefit the larger suppliers. There's no critical mass, and that's what really we need. And for anyone who knows the NHS, there are a very big number of high-scale global manufacturers, but there's also an immensely long tail of smaller suppliers who are equally as important as helping the NHS meet their goals, whether it be a small wig supplier for cancer patients or the local bakery or butchers that supply food to the hospital. So there's a real big mix, and not all of it is clinical. And then finally, with Peppol, it's what we would like to term as the many-to-many. Very similar to a mobile phone network. It works. So when you have a mobile phone, you don't need to worry about whether you're on O2 or Vodafone and whether you can only speak to other people on Vodafone or O2. You just need to worry that you want to make a call to somebody and it works. So effectively, what Peppol does is open up connectivity and benefits to all. And the nice thing about Peppol is we've talked today about a lot of things, and I know Mark wasn't able to give a figure in the Smith and Nephew case, but some of these are very expensive or robust implementations that take a lot of resource or capital. The nice thing about Peppol is that it doesn't need any of that. So for anybody who's on the call today who hasn't picked an access point, please do consider doing that, because actually for the main part, it's absolutely free. So it's not very often you can say there is something out there for nothing that gives you immense value back. But on this time we can, so we should say that. So what did this mean to UK healthcare, and why was the previous situation, in my opinion, so unhealthy? And the answer is, for me, it engendered the stick approach. A closed network, which is what the many-to-many is, existed and really only gave benefits to the hospital if the suppliers joined as well. Even if their suppliers had their own systems and their own way of doing something, they were almost forced to join. And that's just from a technology point of view. And I think we've talked a lot today about technology as the enabler, but what I would say the very most important thing about Peppol is it really does impact relationships between hospitals and suppliers. So Steve mentioned, and he came from the NHS, as I did myself. So for those of you who don't know me, I was part of NHS PASA, and then a director of the Northwest Collaborative Procurement Hub as was, that later became SBS. And this is my very own personal opinion, but there were probably two types of distinct behaviours in the NHS. Firstly, partnership between suppliers and hospitals, looking at whole life costs, strategic partnerships, all of those kind of things. And then the second one, the adversarial relationships, where really the suppliers were sometimes seen as somebody that needed to be controlled and managed. And if I'm honest, the latter was probably in the past maybe more prevalent. And I'm ashamed to say that as a younger person, I probably put a foot in that camp as well. And why was that? And I would argue that there's a direct correlation between capability to do EDI and the relationships that suppliers and hospitals can have. And that's because systems data or lack of data breeds distrust. Disparity, old data, and inability to engage on a level playing field all disrupt the ability to have proper conversations and take decisions based on firm ground. And that's not healthy. If we have sales reps on the call today, you'll probably still have meetings with the NHS where before a meeting can start, you've been asked to provide spend data because the trust struggles to, or there will be historic arrangements or different frameworks where one part of the hospital may have paid or had a different service to another part of the hospital. And again, this just isn't healthy. It's not the fault of suppliers at all. Very often it's the fault of the hospital, but it means often that the relationships have been frozen on a very transactional basis. There's been little engagement outside clinical and procurement staff. And part of that reason is because the NHS has always been thinking about how do they get all suppliers connected so that they can start to get the value of that electronic connection. But they've never stopped chasing that connection. And so they've never matured and evolved to a point where they could actually start to use the data. So what I wanted to do was very briefly talk about NEP. And I would say NEP are the pioneers of Peppol in the UK. So for those of you who can remember when Peppol first came out, there were 6 Pathfinder trusts who started to look at the premise of Peppol. And they did the connectivity and they showed that it worked. But in fairness, many of the benefits were extrapolated and many didn't roll out mainstream and critical mass. And NEP have really taken the reins in terms of doing that. So they started in 2001. They're a consortia created by the NHS and for the NHS. And as I say, it's proved really innovative and been the pioneer, not just because it's adopted Peppol, but also because it's adopted GS1 standards throughout its whole infrastructure. And that means because it's a consortia and because it's done an enormous amount of testing across with us, with other access points, they've actually laid the ground rules for yourselves, the hospitals across the entire NHS. And that's because Peppol works very differently to other old EDI connections. So once one access point has tested with another access point, that data can just flow. Which means, for example, when we've turned on one hospital, and we heard from Leeds this morning, who is a member of NEP, once Leeds has tested with Smith and Nephew, that means that every other hospital in that consortia can turn on Smith and Nephew immediately. And that's been really effective. What I'm really proud of NEP as well is that they've really approached the project with the carrot. I get incredibly frustrated when I see some emails or notes that go out to suppliers from the NHS that are very dictatorial or speak to the benefits of the hospital. And I think the one thing about Peppol has become very clear. It is a win-win situation for both hospital and supplier. So they've very much gone out with an educational background, and they've spoken with the suppliers and really been able to promote the benefits to both the supplier and the hospital, and actually use the process to really get to know the suppliers far better. And part of that is because they recognize the importance beyond transactional. So this isn't about the efficient use of purchase orders. It isn't about receiving accurate invoices per se. Obviously that helps and it creates efficiency. But what they really understand is that Peppol is the foundation and the bedrock of linking product to patient outcome, of understanding as a patient comes in the front door of a hospital and then leaves, what is the point of care cost all the way through that journey, and also recognizing that the patient can be kept more safe through the use of track and trace and Peppol. So where have we got to? When the Pathfinder's finished, I think there are around 20 suppliers that were active in the NHS. That has now extended to over 1,000 suppliers that are actively sending and receiving documentation every single day. There's full GS1 GLN compliance, which is really fantastic to see. Actually, there's now not 6 hospitals or NHS organisations engaged, but actually 280. So if any of you are on this call today and you're not sure which hospitals are available for you to connect to, feel free to reach out to me and we can provide that list. And what's really exciting, in the last few weeks, the first private hospital is engaged with Peppol, which again is fantastic because it shows that they're seeing the benefits that Peppol brings as well. So again, that's really, really good. Very, very quickly, I'll go through this. What I wanted to do was break out the internal and external benefits of Peppol for the hospital and for the wider community. I won't go into the internal efficiencies because I think Leeds did a fantastic job of that. But I do think it is worth noting that we've been through an enormous change. We're still in enormous change with COVID. And I wouldn't underestimate the agility that Peppol has been able to give both suppliers and the hospitals in terms of how they manage their workloads, especially since through much of the COVID, times, a lot of the back office staff within the hospitals have been working remotely. The other thing is that the trusts have started to be able to work with other trusts through the same process. They've started to be able to digitize things like the nationwide services in the NHS, like NHS fleet and lease cards. Really importantly, it's all about internal interoperability as well. So if we go back to the example of the mobile phones, I would suggest that Peppol and GS1 standards are a bit like the iPhone. And actually everything you can do outside of that is an app. So there's lots of stuff that the hospitals want to be able to do. Mark talked this morning around inventory management within Leeds. And obviously using Peppol, the inventory management solutions and the Peppol access points like us, we can talk to each other as well. So again, things like e-rostering for agency staff, it's been really effective. We've been able to link in estates and facilities management. So I know today most of the people on this call will be medical device manufacturers or suppliers, but actually this is extending way outside the medical device or pharmaceutical markets. And then finally, again, using the idea of the app, it's really interesting to see how Peppol is now extending out into the community. So things like community equipment services, home care. So one of the things that's been really exciting is that we've used GS1 standards within NEP to actually create a home care module for patients who want to order products from their own homes. And we've used the GLNs to identify where those products need to be delivered to. And it's just an add-on app to the Peppol infrastructure, just using some innovation. But it again means that there is full traceability of that out into the community. And then most importantly for me, it's how Peppol can change the relationships between hospitals and suppliers. There's a real change in attitudes. There's real collaboration and innovation. So I, as a Peppol access point, spend very little of my day wondering whether the order or the invoice for arriving. That's an automated process. What I'm doing now is sitting down with suppliers and hospitals and actually starting to fix some of the age-old problems of healthcare that we never got to in the past because we were always waiting to do the next EDI or trying to align on standards that the hospital and supplier would use. All that's taken care of now. So we use a lot of time looking at facilitated joint workshops, solving the age-old problems of consignment stock, loan kits, all those kind of good things that have been around for ages and never got solved. So it's actually a really nice time to be around. And then again, the final point I would make is that data is able to drive new partnerships. I'm seeing a change in behavior in how hospitals commission products and services, more commitment contracts, more strategic partnerships when they can see the data and it's their data that they're working on, not having to rely on supplier data. So that's a very, very quick pitted history. I've kept it very high level. If anybody wants to come back to me, then feel free, but I'll open up to questions with George.
Thank you very much, Steve and Anna. It's very clear that there are increasing levels of Peppol standards adoption internationally, which is driving business efficiencies. And from Anna, it's clear that there are the benefits of GS1 and Peppol standards adoption, particularly with NEP and their related organisations. So great to hear. Chris, do we have some questions for Steve and Anna?
We do, but I'm conscious of the time. We are running close to our schedule. But there is one question here, and I think it's worth asking so you can reiterate this. As suppliers, we are constantly asked to sign up to bespoke portals by hospitals, which includes retrieval of purchase orders and submittal of invoices. Will this cease in the near future with the view that the Peppol concept is adopted by hospitals and trusts across the board?
Yes, in answer to the question being very quick, the whole point of Peppol is that all those portals melt away. So imagine Peppol is a front door, you pick your front door, and that determines how those requests come in. So if you have a Peppol access point, all the various portals that you're asked to join, I can't think of them off the top of my head, but the trade shifts, etc., they all melt away. And you just have the one Peppol access point who will be responsible for picking up your data from the entire NHS and sending back your data to the entire NHS.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve and Anna. There is one further question I'd just like to, before we go on to the break, just answer, and that is it mandatory? Is Peppol mandatory to sell to the NHS? Now, the NHS e-procurement strategy stated that that all suppliers must adopt GS1 and Peppol standards. So for you to be compliant to that e-procurement strategy, the answer is yes. That is a straightforward answer. Okay, so time for a break.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Back in 15 minutes, so 12:25. Just a reminder not to close the Zoom session, as you may not get back in by this route. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Get back promptly, please, guys. Thank you.
Welcome back everyone to this GS1 UK UDI forum. We all have already got to our 5th and final session, which is from Geraldine Lissalde-Bonnet from GS1 Global, and she will be presenting on GS1 standards and unique device identification in the EU. Over to you, Geraldine.
Thank you very much, and I'm trying to move my slides. Okay, perfect. So I'm closing the session, and as you heard, UDI was the core of the topic for today, and we didn't discuss so much about the GS1 standards and how they are used to support this implementation. So let's look now at the tool to make all this work. First, the benefits of UDI, and here I'm really putting myself in the shoes of the healthcare providers, because ultimately, if we have UDI regulation in place today, if they are implemented so carefully by the manufacturers, it's to improve patient safety. And so the benefits of UDI, it's not an exhaustive list, but definitely to make sure that you identify your device uniquely and globally, to facilitate all the market surveillance measures and the corrective measures to be taken in case a device is dangerous or defectious. The possibility to marry the device with the data, in particular related to medical health records. And then, of course, the possibility to optimize all the supply chain and all the management in hospital. And if you think back of all the things we've seen over the last year and COVID, in particular, the possibility to make sure that you know what are the devices available in a country or in a hospital, and that you are able to make sure that you're using the right device to treat the right patient, and that this device is safe and efficient. So GS1 and UDI, where is it coming from? What's the relationship? As you can see on the screen, for Europe, we are one of the issuing entity, meaning that the European Commission, based on recommendation that other member states and other countries have followed, has decided to accredit a few standard development organizations across the world in order to be able to assign unique device identifiers based on their regulation. It's a case in the US since many years. It's a case in Europe since 2019. It's also the case in Saudi Arabia. It's a case in South Korea, in Turkey, in Singapore, in China, and in many other countries that are coming next. We have within GS1 not only a piece of paper saying that we are a designated issuing entity, we have also threatened the relationship with the European Commission to make sure that we are really seen as a partner, and that we work with them as part of different work groups, also to ensure the consistency of the requirement with the GS1 system. And you see here 2 examples of the work group we are part of: the medical device coordination group for UDI and the one for UDAMED. That was the introduction, and now let's dig into the UDI system. So the UDI system, as defined by the European Commission for Europe, but also based on the definition of the system by the International Medical Device Regulatory Forum, is divided into 3 parts. The blue part here on the slide is the identifier. It has to be globally unique, and it's divided in 2 components for Europe. You have the basic UDI-DI, which is very special to Europe. None of the countries so far have decided to go for that concept. And then the UDI-DI itself. That UDI-DI and the PIs must be captured both in automatic format and in human readable format. And last but not least, you need to report data element in the UDI database, which is called UDAMED for Europe. And these 3 components, if you draw the parallel with the way we describe the GS1 system, fits perfectly into the GS1 system with these identifiers. So identify your product uniquely and globally across the world, capture that information in a machine readable format, and then also exchange that information, in that case, with the regulator, but also with your supply chain partners. So identify, capture, share is really exactly the same idea behind the GS1 system and the UDI system. If I dig now one step further into the blue part of the UDI system and the identifiers, if I translate the regulatory requirements, which are here on the right, into the GS1 standard, I start with the highest level identifier, which is this basic UDI-DI. The basic UDI-DI is a new level of identification, and it's only for Europe, I repeat it. And it's aiming at identifying a group of devices. And you have here on the slide a picture which will help you to visualize. So these are the same device. They share the common clinical specification and characteristic, and they can be identified for pre-market approval and for all this procedure in the same way. They can also be grouped together as part of UDAMED, and you will see that later. And the idea is to use that identifier really on documentation and in UDAMED, but not to apply it to the product. So it's a kind of virtual identifier you use to group devices and to identify that group of devices which are part of the same family. In the GS1 system, it's called the GMN, and we have aligned the specifications and the standard with a requirement from the European Commission. And unfortunately, here on the slide, you have a white box. So I will ask you to close your eyes and to imagine that the next part on the left side, so the UDI regulatory requirements, would be the UDI-DI. And the UDI-DI in the GS1 translation is the GTIN. That's the common, the identifier that which is used in GS1 to identify trade item. I saw a question earlier. You need to assign one GTIN to one trade item. And that's really the base, the core principle of the GS1 system, and that's also the core principle of the UDI requirements. And you need to identify every level of packaging for UDI, and you stop when you reach the logistic units. And you go down to the unit of use. The unit of use, DI, does not always have to be marked, but nevertheless, you need to assign a unique identifier to that level. And it's what you see on the little picture here. So the syringe will have a GTIN. You move one packaging level higher, you assign a new GTIN, and then you continue moving and assigning GTINs until you reach your logistic unit where you stop having to implement UDI. It doesn't mean that you don't apply any identification on this level, but at least they are not covered by the UDI requirements. And still on that table, you would have had on the left a part related to the unique identification, the UDI PI, which are the production identifiers. And here the regulation is telling you that you can use what is relevant for patient safety and for traceability. And the usual suspects are lot number, expiry date, manufacturing date, serial number. Be careful, the serial number, contrary to pharma, and I saw a few parallel drawn with the FMD, the serialization is not mandatory for a medical device, so it's not always required to apply a serial number next to your GTIN for medical device. You find it in most of the case for implants. And so at the very bottom of this table, you would have had the GTIN plus the application identifiers that we have in the GS1 system equal the UDI requirements. You will have the table as the slide will be distributed, but that's really in a nutshell the parallel and the translation of the UDI requirement into the GS1 standard, and we support the full implementation of this requirement. I won't go into the details of the specificities for procedure pack or configurable devices, etc., but you have to know that on top of the regulation itself, you have a lot of guidance, and not all of them are already released. For example, I saw also a question on how do you identify orthopedic kits and these kind of things. So these are specification that the European Commission is currently working on. They are often asking for our views and how the GS1 system could apply for that. And we are helping them, but be careful, make sure that you always try to dig into the more specific requirements when you have to implement. In terms of GS1's implementation, if the regulation is silent or if it's asking you to apply the standards, then you will have to dig into the GS1 cheat-in allocation rules. And here, it's really with the help of the MO and GS1 UK or any other MO that you will be able to really understand all the details and make sure that you're applying the standards in the correct way and in an harmonized way across the world. And if you do it correctly, then you will really manage to leverage the use of the GS1 at its best, meaning that you will be able to implement one requirement, but it will be duplicated for other similar requirements across the world. If we move to the pink part of the UDI system and the application, I will go quickly here because you saw also in Mark's presentation earlier, in practice, how it works and how these barcodes appear on the packaging. These are examples. You have to keep in mind that the regulation is, let's say, technology neutral, meaning that you don't have a specific type of barcode to apply. It's really any type of barcode as long as they are compliant with ISO standards, and at the case of all the GS1 data carriers. Things to be kept in mind is the fact that you also have in some cases requirement for direct part marking. And in that case, the choice is quite limited because for most of these very specific devices, you have space constraints, and so the data matrix will be the preferred option. And because most of them have to go through the sterilization process, then you have to engrave it. So here again, a short limitation in regards to the choice, but nevertheless, it's important to keep in mind, and I repeat it again, that all the packaging level must be identified down to the unit of use. And now I will slow down because the requests from my colleagues were really to dig into UDAMED. It's not the easiest topic, to be honest, but we are starting to have a few pieces and a few clarifications. So let's see together what are the challenges and where we are today. So first, UDAMED. UDAMED is this huge database in Europe. It's not new. They are building up UDAMED on UDAMED version 1 and version 2. We are now with version 3. And the idea is really to have a database which is covering the entire life cycle of a device, from the pre-market approval down to the use and the clinical investigations or market surveillance activities. And in the middle of it, you have one part which is related to the registration of the device. And to draw the comparison with the US, because I think it's the one which is the most common system implemented today for UDI, you see here that the UDI database, which has been known as being very challenging to implement, etc., in the US, is only one super small part of the entire UDAMED database. So it's not for you to panic, but it's for you to keep in mind that UDAMED is not only UDI, it's much more than that. We have already for the UDI database different pillars that are released. They call it different modules that are released. And the Commission said that they will plan in releasing them one by one. And the idea is that the requirement for registration will really be entering into force and implemented once UDAMED will be fully functional. And that's the wording you find in the regulation. Lots of discussion happen on what fully functional mean. And so the idea is now that the requirement for UDAMED and for registration of devices will become applicable in 2024. So it will be mandatory as from 2024. In the meantime, as the Commission will release modules, you will have the possibility to voluntarily register economic operator, devices, certificates in UDAMED. So the idea is really to have this progressive and gradual release with voluntary registration, and then at one point, the mandatory deadline is coming. So let's look at the pillar or the modules related to device registration. And here is a screenshot from a presentation that the Commission gave in March during the MDCG meeting on UDAMED. And they were showing what the playground looked like. The playground for this module is open until July this year. And the idea is that after the playground is closed, they will do some cleaning and some improvements. And in September, the module for UDI, so for device registration, will be live. So you'll see here, what is important is that you really have these different modules. So today, the actor registration module is live, and that's a prerequisite. So if you want to register a device, you first must register yourself as one of the actors. And not all type of economic operator are able to register themselves as an actor. You have to be a manufacturer, authorized representative, importer, or a packager of kit and procedure pack. Once you've done so, you receive a number that is randomly generated by UDAMED, so it's not GS1, called SRN. With this number, you will be able to register your devices. You will also be able to download or upload your certificates and so on and so on. So really, first step, register yourself as an operator. And now we are trying to register ourselves, to start to register devices. So as you can see, you have different roles, and I mentioned it already, and you have the possibility to change your role. And why is this important? It's because depending on who you are, you will have different rights and different possibility to edit the different fields in UDAMED. The scope, so that's what can you do today as part of the playground. It will not be like that forever. They will, of course, open the scope as the module will be live. But today, what can you do? In regards to device, you can register the devices that are covered by the regulation, as well as legacy devices. And you can also register the procedure, the system and procedure packs. You can also do some searches, and you can do different versioning and add different version and make some change in what you have already registered. So you can also register your certificates. You can also do some search in regards to certificates. And last but not least, you can upload different information related to specific devices. And you can download a few information as well as a certificate. It's not because I'm presenting this as a scope that it means that everything is working well. So this is the goal, and this is what the Commission is aiming at testing. But today, not everything is working perfectly. What are the challenges? So UDAMED is often seen as a monster, to be honest, and the Commission is often struggling to deliver. We had, we had many delays. One of them due to COVID, but other due to the fact that it was difficult for the Commission to be able to take on board all the testing, manage all the environment, etc. So as I said, compared to the Good ID, for example, UDAMED is a house with different pillars, with different PCs, potentially the possibility for the data to communicate across the different pillars, etc. The objectives are different. So part of UDAMED is related to the pre-market authorization. Another one is related to purely data device identification. Another one is more intended to make sure that we have the proper follow-up and vigilance in regards to the device. The users are different, and it's all based on regulation. So what are the advice and what we have seen so far? The advice from the Commission is to make sure you have the correct access profile and you have been approved as one of the users. So the first step to register yourself. Second is to check all the documentation which is available. So as I said, for the identification part before, you have plenty of guidance depending on the type of device you want to identify. It's the same for UDAMED. They have a web page dedicated to UDAMED where you find different documentation and the possibility to help, and really test also all your files. And you have the possibility to see online different examples of XML messages. Status. So what we have, again, as advice from the Commission, not really from GS1, because we are issuing at an entity for the identifiers, but in principle, we have nothing to do with UDAMED. Focus on the minimal legal requirement. They call it the minimum viable product. So really don't try to put everything in there as a first shoot. Just go first with what is required, and then you extend it afterwards when you know it's working. Provide feedback to the Commission in order for them to be able to improve the system. And here I will open a parenthesis because we received a lot of feedback from users saying there is a mistake in UDAMED, meaning that on the UDI field, there is a possibility to enter different size of GTINs. So you could have a GTINs with 14 digits, 12 digits, 13 digits, it would work. And so you could identify the same device with 3 different types of GTINs, because in principle, the recommendation we have given based on the experience we had with the other database in other jurisdiction was to always go for a GTIN in a 14-digit format, adding zeros at the beginning. By not taking it into account and by allowing the possibility to have different size of GTINs, so different lengths of GTINs, the Commission was then allowing the possibility to register the same device with different GTINs. And so we asked them to correct that, and we just got the confirmation that it's taken into account. So they are doing constant review and constant update in UDAMED. Make sure that you provide that feedback, how to do it. Either you go on the UDAMED website and you have this email address where you can send email and you share your feedback. If you are part of MedTech Europe, Catalin is often asking for feedback and also sharing updates and information from the Commission. Or you can also knock at the door of GS1 UK or GS1 Global Office, and we will also forward this information to the Commission. But do it, because it's still open for testing and the playground is still open. Once it will be closed and everything will be live, it will be much more difficult to change it. Talking about deadlines and when things will be live. So the first, let's say the first wave of development was related to this actor, certificate and device modules. And for that one, the playground for the device module is open until July, and then production will be going on, and the release is planned for end of September. Then they will start to develop the rest of the UDAMED modules related to the different documentation for vigilance. And this will start after summer, so in September as well this year. We don't know yet when it will be open for playground and when it will be launched for use. And then you have all the other requirements that are related to the post-market surveillance and to this, how do you use it concretely and who has access, etc., for which we still have no visibility. When I did this slide deck, I didn't have all the information related to master UDI. So I did this time frame, and you saw this time frame already many times, either as a pyramid or as a table. So this time it's an arrow with bubbles. So nothing new in there, but I will share with you verbally the update that we have in regards to the master UDI. So first of all, the master UDI is a new level of identification for Europe. So you would have your basic UDI, which is not on the packaging and which is aiming at identifying a family of devices for documentation and for UDAMED. You will have your UDI, which is your G team, which is on the product and identifying every trade item. And you will have one level between, which will be the master UDI, which will also be on the packaging and grouping devices with a large volume of individualization, and so a large volume of records in UDAMED if they would have had to be registered in UDAMED at the GTIN level. And in particular, the Commission has targeted eyewear product, so contact lens, spectacular frame, spectacular lens, saying for these devices, we don't want you to register all GTINs in UDAMED because you have different diameters, different shape, different size, different optical strengths, and so we will end up with too many records and UDAMED will explode. They are also targeting other type of products in the future, such as sutures, catheters, etc., or orthopedic screws, all these kind of devices. They will start with eyewear product, and the idea is that a new standard is developed by the issuing entities. We are still waiting for the work request. We are still waiting for the clinical for the specification from the Commission, etc. It should be ready for September. So when the UDI registration module is out, this is already a possibility, and it's already planned in there. In waiting for all that to happen, the Commission just released a few weeks ago a new guidance. It's a policy paper actually, and they are saying that for eyewear product, they should move ahead, with the deadlines for assignment and labeling of the devices. However, they are not allowed to use the possibility for voluntary registration in UDAMED. In waiting for all the things in UDAMED to be fixed, they must wait for really the last deadline when it's mandatory to register the devices in UDAMED. So that's an update on the time frame. If you are a manufacturer of eyewear product, keep your eyes open. We will need you to develop the standards with a very, very fast track, and don't register anything in UDAMED until the last mandatory deadline of today, 2024, because things will be changing. And to close, so what do you do when you receive regulation with UDI and you need to implement? So you already had good tips from the previous speakers, and this is really just a high-level checklist. And if you knock at the door of any of the GS1 MOs, they will be able to help you. So assess the product and see whether they are falling or not under the scope. Assess the class for each product, because it will also define the deadline. Select or define your issuing agency. Contact GS1 UK or any other MO so they can help you to assign the company prefix, to implement the different identifiers, etc. And assign them to the product, register everything in UDAMED, barcode the product, and make sure that you have the right system for the maintenance of the data. That's the order which is in the regulation. And if I have to give you an advice, start with data, because it's often where you will need a lot of time to clean your data, to make sure that you have the right understanding of the definition, to make sure that you understand how UDAMED is working, because as you saw, it's still under progress, even if the deadline is the release is in September. So don't underestimate that part, and again, just ask for support to GS1. Rest of the world, so this is a map which is changing very often. The last little tick was for Singapore, because we just got their requirements. And you see Australia, TGA launched a series of webinars on UDI, so it's not a very user-friendly time zone for us, but nevertheless very interesting. They are looking at the basic UDI idea as well for Australia. Brazil is also working on draft requirements, and you have the usual suspects where things are already running and implemented, but make sure that you have that map in mind. and that you see also, you leverage also the benefits of using a system of standards which is global when the requirements are truly global as well. And I see we are running short in time, but this was just a slide to make it even more relevant after the year we all had to go through, and to really mention again that ultimately it's standards are needed to help and to make sure that patients are safe. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Geraldine, for the presentation and for the clarity on UDI and GS1 standards and what has been described as a monster, the really useful information on UDIMED. So thank you very much. Have we got time for one quick question, Chris?
I think so. Right, okay. Can a UK manufacturer register themselves in UDIMED, or do we need a EU rep to do this?
I don't know, to be honest. No, I mean, we've been working a lot in clarifying the requirements related to the CE mark, for example, and how it will work with the UK CA mark. But on that one, I don't know. So you have an help desk and a web page. I'm happy to note the question down and to come back to you with a response, but I don't know.
Thank you, Geraldine. There are quite a few other questions as well. Just to reiterate that we have the panel Q&A session coming up on the 29th of June. So we'll share these questions with Geraldine in advance, and hopefully she'll have answers to at least a few of them. So thank you all very much. I have some closing remarks. I think you'll agree that the panelists have given us some real insights into what we are doing, why we're doing this, the current regulations, and what more there is to come. One of my key takeaways should be that whilst the regulations tell us what to do, and GS1 and Peppol standards enable us to do it, it is the great efforts from manufacturers and healthcare providers working together that releases the potential. As I used to say to suppliers into retail when I first started working at GS1 UK all those years ago, when they've been asked to use barcodes, don't think of this as a burden, but as an opportunity to improve your own processes with scanning barcodes for stock picking, stock control, etc., but also to improve relationships and help make your customers' processes more efficient and ultimately improve patient safety. Right person, right product, right place. Over to you, George.
Yeah, a key takeaway as well is, as you just alluded to, that patient safety piece. So the clear impact for patient safety by the benefits in tracking and tracing medical devices and medicines, not only across the supply chain, but across the patient pathway as well. So Chris has already reminded you, but just another reminder about the Q&A panel session on the 29th of June, and you'll get an invitation to this along with the links to the recordings and presentations after the session. And finally, thank you again to the panelists and to all of you who have attended, including those who have joined us on our live YouTube stream today as well. But a final huge thank you to Natasha at GS1 UK, who has put so much hard work behind this forum to get us all together and to deliver these sessions. So thank you, Natasha. Thank you all, and have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you all, everybody. Take care. Speak to you all soon, I'm sure. Take care. Bye.